all the panelists to take part of this. I will, so we have, we are actually, so to give you a bit of background for the participants, that typically in these workshops, we would like to, we always have to, try to do this panel and bring, various people from various backgrounds, right? So we have actually people from the industry, from academia and the public sector, and then I'll introduce them first, and then we can initiate this panel. So we have Dr. Chadi Assi from Concordia University. Hello? Anyone mention something? So we have Dr. Chadi Assi from Concordia. We have Retired General, I call him Guy Walsh because of the French, but he always, he doesn't mind. I know that he doesn't mind. Guy Walsh from NSCC at UTSA. We have Chris Griffin from Florida Lambda and Lambda Rail, and we have Ken Miller from ESnet. So I'll briefly introduce them in terms of their bios. So we have General Guy Walsh. Guy, he has been with the NSCC. He's the founding executive director here at the NSCC. NSCC, to the participants that don't know, is actually a newly initiative here at UTSA, which brings basically people from industry, academia, and government to address a lot of different cybersecurity problems. General Walsh actually has a lot of experience, more than 20 years of experience in managing a lot of operations in the cyberspace, in the aerospace, disaster relief, and recovery. Also, he did a lot of work with different entities similar to the Air Expeditionary Wing in Afghanistan. And he's a National Defense Fellow with the INSS, the Institute of National Security Studies. And so, I personally wanted to have General Guy on with us today to bring his, public sector experience, and especially what is, what's happening here at UTSA with the NSCC. So we thank him again for taking part. We have Dr. Assi from Concordia. What can I say about Dr. Assi? He's a full professor at Concordia. He's an IEEE fellow on his contributions based on his, career elite contributions. He did his PhD at CUNY in New York, and he did some work as a visiting researcher from Nokia Research Center in Boston. And he's currently on the editorial board of IEEE Communication Service and Tutorials, Transactions on Communications, and Transactions on Vehicular Technology. So Dr. Assi here on this panel is representing obviously the academic side of things, and he has been doing a lot of security work, network security and security work, part of the research centers at Concordia University in Montreal, Canada. So thank you very much, Dr. Assi, for taking part. We have also Ken Miller. Ken, he comes from ESnet that he joined recently, but he works previously at the EPOC, Engagement and Performance Operations Center. He was the lead designer on Science DMZ on CC Star at Penn State. Okay, he did a lot of work also on flow analysis using GPUs and physical systems. Used a lot of S-Flow, and recently he has been he done a lot of work also on the financial model related to the maintenance and continuous improvement of Science DMZ. So Ken's experience from an operational perspective, but mostly focusing on Science DMZ will be crucial to this panel. So we thank Ken also for his contribution to this panel. And finally, we have Chris Griffin, comes from the Florida Lambda Rail, and he's the research and educational, which is the research and educational network of the state of Florida. Okay, he is also the network architect at UF, University of Florida, and his mostly work is on dense wave optical networks, high performance research networks, and virtualization. And he has completed some bachelor degree at USF, and I think he did some collaboration previously with Dr. Ghani from USF. So again, I would like to thank everyone for their contribution. So what will happen in this panel is that there's a few questions that I will post, and you can take turn however you think is reasonable. And then I don't know if you, and then we can ask also the participants if they have some questions that we can also answer live. That would be quite beneficial. So the first question that that directly came to my mind is, from your perspective, how are you seeing, how do you perceive this cybersecurity posture currently? That's what's happening through our COVID, because we have seen recent news about COVID-related attacks, but also in general how you are perceiving the cybersecurity posture targeting your infrastructure, the critical infrastructure, high-speed networks, and what are the common techniques that you are that you use on a daily basis, but also you think should be there basically to mitigate such concerns. Again, given that your diverse backgrounds, it would be great to bring whatever experience and ideas that you have from your background. So please don't be restricted to the questions per se, but on the kind of the umbrella of the question rather. So I will not moderate who would start. Feel free to jump in on this.
So I think out of respect to the general, maybe the general should.
That's a great idea, Dr. Assi, for sure.
Okay, no, I'd love to jump in. First, again, thank you for inviting me. And to, I think the point there is, as you look at the bios, I'm coming at it from a different approach probably than a lot of what you've been doing on the technical side. So what I will do is just maybe share a little bit. Part of the question that you asked there talks about, are you seeing new threats? Mm-hmm. And get it a different perspective. Rather than looking at what's coming out of a new APT, out of an adversary, or the technical innovation, I'm really looking at it for what our normal operations look like in a post-COVID-19 area here. Mm-hmm. What does security now look like? Cybersecurity, but even the broader security, and what I'll say a much more broadly dispersed world. We weren't set to go into this type of operation, whether you're talking about at the university level at UTSA, whether we're talking about at the city level for the city of San Antonio where I'm at, whether you're talking about the state or a nation perspective. So I really think we need to look at it, because some of what the new threat is the old threat, because we're trying to operate much more remotely. So how do we, in a new established area there? So the first part I would jump in with respect to critical infrastructure and talk about that is, my first, and I'm going to use the term reaction, was to put on the general officer hat and say, let's take charge and see what we're doing here. We were able to establish our communications and security, whether it be with our research teams and our university, for our internal dialogue, discussion, and our coordination and our information sharing fairly easily. And I use the term easily. They made it look easy, but the University of Texas San Antonio was able to quickly be able to utilize our current security processes to a great degree to bring about 35,000 students online to continuity of our operations, in this case, of our education and our research. Obviously, there's a couple areas within research, specifically within some of our labs that we're still doing in the biomedical and biomedical research labs that are doing that we still need a physical presence. But what I would also say is, from a security perspective, it's not just about the technical solutions, but what we go forward. And I don't know if it's worthwhile to share the screen, but I'll at least talk a little bit about it. I reached out to the Department of Homeland Security to look and say, what do we need to set up to now build out our communications and do secure communications and look at the specific threats that are coming up related to COVID-19. So we, in our case, stood up what is called the COVID-19 Cyber Threat Task Force. I've got about 60 folks on that. We have a website that I can share later, but we meet every Tuesday morning, and that has teams from Department of Homeland Security, from FBI, from Secret Service, from NSA, and from all of the military and federal government partners here in San Antonio. We also work with the first briefers on that are the Southwest Texas Fusion Center to talk about what the threats are. So we get weekly updates. We actually update a website daily, but we actually coordinate and talk about it weekly every Tuesday with all of our government partners, to include the CISOs from the city of San Antonio, to include Director of Information Resources and the CIO's office out of the state of Texas, and across the board there. So it's been really just as much about the people part and the leadership part. So let me stop there because, again, I wanted to broaden it out just with the technical solutions and our new threats, but really looking how did we adapt to COVID-19. So I'll turn it back over. Thank you.
Excellent, excellent. And yeah, I mean, I know that also the Canadian, right? We talked about one time with the Canadian counterparts, and I know that they are doing the same as well with different, entities. And so I think it's, very relevant. And I'll leave some comments to the other panelists, maybe Dr. Assi, Ken, or Chris.
And I would say that I would agree with what the general said, and I would add that because I'm looking at the questions that you have asked, Elias, and I would say that the top sectors that are today the most vulnerable to cyber threats are, I would say, energy. I would call energy, I would call health, and the supply chain. So these are particularly vulnerable because imagine, there is a disruption in the supply chain, and people are confined to their homes. We expect the delivery every day of food and goods, and if the supply chain is disrupted because of cyber attack, that could have devastating effect. In terms of the cyber security concerns, I think I'm looking also at your questions. I would say that ransomware today and phishing attacks are DDoS are among the top concerns. So what are your employed security tools and techniques to mitigate such concerns?
Yeah, maybe Dr. Assi, maybe you can shed light on some of the the work that has been doing on the maybe IoT and
right.
Other.
So providing operators with the capabilities such as detecting, for instance, the compromise on IoT devices, early detection of the emergence of a new family of IoT malware, and their propagation campaigns, and as well as the detection of IoT bots. So these are things that we have been also lately playing with. And what we have seen through our analysis is that there is 2 to 4 times increase in exploits against the health sector by observing some of the data on the darknet that we have at our disposal.
Exactly. Yeah. Any Ken and Chris would like to have your perspective?
Yeah, I would agree with what they're saying there. Providing operator tools, some of the pieces to look into some of the data. I know that even since a lot of people are remote, accessing some of the data to make sure you're going through the VPN service to get access to the data. So kind of pen testing from the outside, things like that are just, and also providing additional tools for, if people assume that people are not at work, or what's protecting the data. So is anyone scanning the network and looking at things like that, looking at DDoS solutions, making sure you have, either NetFlow or IPFix flow data coming off there, or even some sort of packet mirror, or like using SFlow for packet sampling. So you actually get the data directly to see what's really going on. So.
Well.
Yeah, this is Chris. I would concur with everything that's been said. I think the malware point is an excellent point. You have large amounts of data stored in large data stores with very high capacity CPUs sitting right there ready to go. And so in a lot of academic institutions, that data may represent months or years of work. and recovering that data, which could be extremely expensive to redo. So I think that's an excellent point. I think that you have to really understand, especially in the Science DMZ, your command and control surface very well to be able to secure it, because the whole principle of the Science DMZ is try to be as frictionless as you can to allow research to propagate and move forward. And if you understand your command and control, that allows you to secure it and to monitor it without being too intrusive into the scientific process. Things like mirroring command and control traffic over to IDSs like Zeek to watch what's going on, and then understanding your traffic patterns. What's normal for a Science DMZ. Sometimes that can be really hard. Sometimes it's not that hard, and a lot of times threshold monitoring can help a lot.
Actually, Chris, talking about this point about Science DMZs, there was a talk yesterday by I think some folks from ESnet about the DDoS problem in Science DMZ compared to the typical networks, typical internet, and I was just speculating: is it really a problem of detecting these? What's the difference? How we can shape these DDoS parameters to detect them in comparison between the Science DMZs and the typical internet? Is this a real problem that you face? Because I feel that legitimate Science DMZ, transactions or communication, to a certain degree is quite easily distinguishable from DDoS, but still, I don't know who was the presenter. He mentioned that this, and I couldn't ask him the question really at that time, but from your perspective, from what Dr. Assi said in terms of DDoS and targeting different, including Science DMZs, how different is it really?
So I think DDoS is easier to detect than the Science DMZ, but the other thing to keep in mind is the Science DMZ in a lot of cases, high performance computing environments are designed for high performance computing and networking. They are the big gun in the DDoS world, and so they're a very appetizing target. If you can compromise a major HPC center that is multi-100 gig connected, that's a huge weapon. Now, you're probably easily able to detect it and shut it down fairly quickly, but still, the damage that can be done, and maybe more importantly, the political damage that could be done. If a major HPC center was grabbed and then used in a major attack, that could be devastating to an organization.
100%, yeah.
And one other behavior I'd like to mention with COVID is that, from an academic networking perspective, we're seeing somewhat of a change in usage behavior, the opposite of what you might think. In Florida, our network usage is way down. And in an interesting way, that can make it easier to detect problems, but it also means, as Ken mentioned, people are off campus. They may not be monitoring things as well as they do when they're on campus. Who's watching the door? Yeah.
100%. And by the way, talking also on Ken's comment related to these VPNs, so we're recently working also on detecting these exploitations, and we see a lot of this VPN usage and the fact that they are connecting to these organizations, and we see a lot of scans coming from them. So it's definitely a problem, yeah. But also, Chris, I'm personally interested on this. The security of these Science DMZs and how they are different and how to do it, as you mentioned, in a non-intrusive way. So I think that's a very good topic, I think. Yeah. Okay, so let me jump to question number 2. Let me see. Okay, so the question is mostly related to usage of AI techniques, learning techniques, machine learning, and to address different cybersecurity problems from your perspective, right? Whether you are working with private vendors, whether you are actually developing these tools, whether you are working with collaborators that do this. So there's a big hype. There's the White House has a mandate to actually do AI for security and security for AI, because obviously we know that AI also could be maliciously manipulated. So this is a big thing nowadays, and there's a lot of academic funding, but also the public sector is also pushing a lot on this. So I would like to hear your input on on general, applications of AI to security and security to AI, whether it comes to science DMZs or broadly applicable as well. So maybe we can start also with General Walsh, and then go through Dr. Assi and Ken, and then Chris.
Okay, great. So you alluded to it right off the bat. It starts with, are we resourced into here? And I think everybody understands that as a nation, we have under-resourced this area in terms of artificial intelligence. If you look basically at the investment that China has made, that Russia has made, that other countries has made. So I think overall that's true within the Western area. And I'm always happy if someone corrects me if I'm wrong there. But so part of it is, just to be straightforward, on March 10th, one of my last travels back into DC was to visit with Congressman Will Hurd from our 23rd district here in Texas. He is currently working the bipartisan legislation to try to, because it all starts with that. It all starts with law. It all starts with some of the funding that we need to put up with Congress, with the power of the purse to put that in there. So we've been very active in that. Very particularly, Dr. Darisha Kudithipudi, who leads our artificial intelligence team called the Matrix Consortium right now, has been working with that group to be able to establish, actually write that and help draft the legislation. So that's an important point, because if we're going to put funding against it, it has to be prioritized, whether it be by the White House, whether it be by Congress, but by the federal government there. So very particularly within UTSA, we have a couple areas. I mentioned Dr. Darisha Kudithipudi. Right now, they have been involved in COVID-19, working with Metropolitan Health, working with the state, and actually feeding up to some of the COVID-19 data information there that you've watched at the Johns Hopkins number, to be able to from a bottoms up. So we've been working really at a local level to inform and using AI to be able to do predictive modeling for the requirements, not everything from PPE to distribution of the supply chain to work hours and availability of doctors and those type of things. So there's been a tactical piece that they've been putting there, but she's primarily been focused on the neuromorphic type of things. At the same time, and Elias knows much more than I do about this, but we've been working in the AI with Dr. Paul Rad and with Elias's boss, Dr. Nicole Beebe, who's the director of our Center for Security and Analytics, to look at a couple things, very specifically applying the AI algorithms to the cybersecurity domain in general. So for instance, using language models and knowledge graphs for endpoint threat detection, using federated learning for addressing the privacy in IoT and personal devices. And then the second category is really about security of the AI algorithms themselves, setting adversarial attacks and defenses from a couple different angles that we're doing there. So that's what we're doing specifically within the AI area here and looking at our broad cybersecurity. And maybe Elias can just give a hint, because he's actually involved in that with Dr. Beebe and Dr. Rad on there at the end of this. I don't want to take up anybody's time, but hopefully that gets us started here.
Yeah.
Yes, I can't agree more with the general on his description of the use of AI. Indeed, one cannot contest the benefits of using AI in enforcing security in our networks. However, this is a double-edged sword. Adversaries can instrument AI or leverage its capabilities to build sophisticated cyber attacks. Okay, they can leverage the vulnerabilities to deploy or can leverage the vulnerabilities of systems deploying AI to subvert their performance. The general mentioned, I think, federated learning and adversarial learning. So these are indeed tools. For instance, adversarial machine learning is a tool that can be indeed used to improve the robustness of the machine learning or the system deploying machine learning against adversarial attacks, as well as the use of federated learning in the context of IoT to maintain the data that is generated by these IoT elements to maintain the privacy of these of the data generated by the IoT. Okay, so how do we deploy this? We're currently working on investigating approaches that are deploying machine learning, for instance, to do detection of new families of IoT malware. Okay, and attributing the scans, for instance, that we see on the internet to new malware or variants of malware family. So this is how we are in the or exploiting the use of AI in some of the projects that we are. So back, yes.
Excellent, yeah. Excellent, Dr. Assi. Maybe Ken can comment a bit also on his perspective, and then Chris.
Typically, we didn't get into the point before I left Penn State to the AI ML piece. Mostly, we went as far as looking up known bad actors and known ASs and IP addresses, adding filters in there and thresholds, like was mentioned earlier, triggering off things like that. We were looking into it, but I just never got that far. Sorry.
Yeah, and I think from a performance perspective, we have to be careful about this, right? Especially in the science DMZ environment, right? I think
not as, I would say not as much, because a lot of that, most of the security monitoring and pieces in a science DMZ is out of band. You can use like an SDN controller to write back in pieces to throttle down or even block traffic. You can mark flow, you can mark certain flows coming in. You can steer them. You can put them in a queue if you want to. There's a couple things with SDN we were kind of playing around with. But we never really got into the AI ML piece. But since most of it's out of band, then it really doesn't affect us. It's still friction free. It's just we just had an implicit denial and everything. We only allowed traffic that did get through to through, and that was everything else was logged.
Okay, great. Yeah. Maybe Chris.
Yeah, and within Florida, we've seen a big increase in the member research universities and their participation in AI. So it's definitely coming. We haven't, from a regional perspective, really done much with operational AI in the network security posture side. But from what we're doing right now, normal intrusion detection systems, intrusion prevention systems rely on things like symmetry, and they're very flow-based things, right? And so from a regional science DMZ perspective, symmetry can be a very difficult thing to enforce. In fact, it's pretty unrealistic to expect any kind of network symmetry just because of the way modern networks work. So it occurs that, we're gathering a ton of metadata from the network, and it seems logical to that metadata would then be fed into some AI-based analysis, which could, as Ken mentioned, result in rules being pushed back into the network to block bad actors or limit damage being done, etc.
Excellent. Yeah, and I don't know, Jason. I don't know if anyone else.
Yeah, you can even exploit.
Dr. Assi, you're cutting off a bit. Do you mind repeating this?
Yes, I'm saying AI's capabilities can also be exploited by more efficient reconnaissance, huh? So
yeah, you have to be worried about anytime you directly interconnect AI directly into your network. In a lot of cases, what we've seen, or even with non-AI systems, they don't necessarily go in and immediately implement a block or a change in network behavior, but they require a human to okay that change, right? So it may not be a direct link between AI, because you're absolutely right. I mean, if people understand the way these algorithms work, they can leverage them to do damage to the very infrastructure that you're trying to protect.
Yeah.
I would agree. And from an operational perspective, the same kind of pieces, we actually built a piece that would create like a list of possible threats or possible DDoS or possible scans, things like that. And we actually could you could actually click and trigger, do you want to block this or not? Click yes, click no. And it would automatically remove the SDN rule about after 15 minutes. So it was something that we could either put in place permanently put in place as more of a dynamic application, or, like you said, fully run it, on all the time. So if it detects something, it blocks it automatically. So as we were kind of messing around with this, it was one of the pieces where we weren't really sure how this was going to scale or what we needed to do to really implement, on some of these dynamic activities. So.
Excellent. Thanks for the input. Yeah, just one comment on maybe General Guy's comment. So some of the guys some of the folks that what they're doing with AI here, for example, a guy mentioned, Paul Rad, for example, he has a lot of, he has a project also on, visual analytics for identification in crowded places and stuff like this. And, obviously this is very susceptible to ML exploitation, right? You can easily do some manipulation and to avoid the detection. Like my group also is working on IPv6 scanning and how we can efficiently, for example, scan the IPv6 space, obviously, because, heuristics and, brute force methods do not work because of the, obviously the biggest, the IP space. So there's how we can start with the seed and then learn from that seed and then go directly to populated places and then continue doing that. Because we do a lot of active scans, but we have a problem on this. I know also Nicole Beebe's group does a lot of internal threat detection, and they're using a lot of behavior analytics with AI on that. Another project also deals with ransomware, and there's a group from the affiliated with the computer science department. They're doing a lot of AI targeting mostly ransomware basically, and how we can proactively detect these ransomware before actually being executed, whether they're operating in critical infrastructure, sign DMZ, etc. So for sure, there's a lot of things here, and I think the input here was very good. Jason, I don't know if any of the attendees do have any comments, anything? Anyone would like some questions from maybe you guys as well? From Jason's side, that would be insightful, I think.
So we don't see any questions yet, but certainly attendees use the Q&A feature if you have any, and we can pose them to the panelists. Excellent,
thank you, Jason. So I'll jump to a question. I have a question from Jeff. I just want to stop here. In terms of exploits and network hardware, are you seeing external actions, compromise firm drivers, or something else as the biggest threat? So anyone has some input on hardware, on network hardware mostly? Anyone can shed light on this? Maybe, I don't know if Chris or Ken can maybe are better to answer this.
Yeah. Generally, the biggest threats we see are the things that are hardest to change. So the software threats are there, but generally they're easy to mitigate. Once you start getting into firmware and BIOS type systems, those are generally the ones that people forget about, and those are kind of the more dangerous ones. So yeah, it's a danger. The other thing is, in a lot of HPC environments, you have ILO type environments, KVM type environments where you have these embedded systems built into all of the individual compute nodes, and those are generally supposed to not be exposed outside of a management network. But sometimes those do get opened up, and those can be a real challenge.
Okay, I would agree with that. I just think just a good practice of pen testing and trying out your resources, or even going as far as monitoring availability, but then going further into monitoring certain ports, and then going as far as monitoring certain applications to see what's really going on, and having something from the cloud or something come back in towards your campus as well, and try to see what's going in from the outside in as well. I think it's just a good practice to get into. So
excellent. Let's see, we have another. I'll take this question because I think it's good to have these questions. Do you foresee some more collaboration happening between communities of the same research centers, universities, to help share security blacklists or any malware to help protect everyone? So this is a question basically about cybersecurity, threat intelligence distribution, and malware information. I think there's a lot of assets, you know, a lot of entities here as well. So I don't know if anyone from General Guy maybe can comment on this in terms of cyber threat intelligence sharing. I think because he's more involved with the, you know, the public sector entities. But from my perspective, I know that there's, I mean, there's obviously the certs here in the US, in Canada. These are from the, you know, kind of from the public sector entities that do a lot of work with the ISPs to share threat information coming from organizations, ISPs, and like that. So there's a lot of endeavors on this. I don't know if any one of the panelists would like to add something on cyber threat intelligence on here.
So I'll just jump in to give a quick perspective. And the answer to the question is, again, from 10 years working at US, I will say adamantly yes in terms of that. So I was there mostly through what I'll say the stand-up of our Department of Homeland Security, which really, so if you remember, we used to have this thing called the bubble chart, and it talks about authorities' responsibilities. And across that, very specifically, the Department of Homeland Security has stepped up in terms of building its information sharing, both its protocols with STIX and TAXI, working through the organization that stood up now, known as CISA, the Cybersecurity and Critical Infrastructure Agency, security agency there. So that's the first part. We, very particularly, DoD is primarily looking outside of US space in terms of that, in terms of defending. And then the third part of that bubble was the Department of Justice and the FBI looking at it from the criminal. That level of coordination, you'll never get it perfect, but I will tell you that the level of sharing on that, having come from Fort Meade and National Security Agency and the headquarters for US Cyber Command, all of those people are sitting on the same floor. So when you're looking at that building called the ICC, the Integrated Cyber Center, every one of those major organizations is sitting in there. We very particularly work with what was called Pathfinder, which was how does the intelligence community and how does the Department of Defense actually support the authorities and responsibilities held by Department of Homeland Security. So that was a major focus area on the federal side. And then on the state side, if you remember, most of the things, and let's just talk one right now that everybody is going to be concerned about shortly, which is the US electoral system and having confidence in that system. That actually doesn't belong to the federal government. The electoral process in the United States, those systems in the electoral process, whether it be the, when you get down to the actual voting machines and that's all owned within each of the individual states. So that level of coordination in terms of security and building that up has to work between federal and government and state. So at the higher levels, I will tell you, we will never get it perfect, but that is tremendously a focus. It is up there between federal and state governments.
Excellent. Excellent. So thank you guys for your input here. And I'll move just for time limitations, I'll move to question 3 and then we'll take more questions as we move. So question 3 is about data sharing, basically. So I think many, Chris and Ken hinted on this. So the question says basically, what practices or tools do you currently implement to curate, which means retrieve, store, process, discard sensitive research data? And if you deal with any type of data transfer that requires encryption or maybe, also integrity verification or stuff like that. So maybe, just quick input on this from your perspectives as well. I don't know if General Guy would like to input or.
So the research data, Elias, that you are referring to, is it like data set that one uses in his or her research?
Yeah, it can be research data. It could be data to actually, enable research, similar to what the Science DMZ networks they do. So any type of data, basically, that you guys deal with on a daily basis.
So we are striving actually to get access to the data. I can tell you that for the past several years, we have been working with Hydro-Québec, which is the major power utility in Quebec. And we've been after them for many, many years to share at least, even sanitized data they are not willing to share with us. Okay. Even my understanding is that their employees, they don't have access to the data. So some of our students, whenever they are in need of access to some data, they have to go to their facility. Huh? Now we have access also to you and I, Elias, we have access to other types of data, which is the darknet data. So that is publicly available, and this is where we look at cyber threat intelligence. This is where we look at inferring from the scans that we see there some threats or malware. This is where we do our malware analysis. So for that, I think you probably are best to talk about how we acquire this data and how this data is, how you do the warehousing for the data.
Yeah, thank you, Doctor. Concerning maybe Ken, or Chris can mention also some aspects on their work on Science DMZ and what's happening in Florida about data retention, maybe, or maybe doing some encryption. I don't know if they have some aspects on that as well.
Yeah, so on the storage, I don't really mess too much with the storage side, but on the transfer side, most of the transfers that we've seen have not been classified as sensitive in nature. However, I would say that a lot of traffic is at least somewhat proprietary in nature, and so encryption at line rate has always been kind of a challenge to do it in an affordable way and to do it in a flexible way. We've seen some researchers who kind of pre-encrypt and send the data already encrypted, and they use grid FTP or other transfer protocols to move it. We actually had one use case where we built layer 2 VPNs for people which are not encrypted, and then they actually used MACsec to build a point-to-point tunnel through that layer 2 VPN and did it with commodity switches and was able to achieve basically a pretty close to line rate 10 gigabit per second encrypted transfer using just very inexpensive commodity switches. We're starting to see IPsec capabilities move into more of the big iron boxes. So there is a possibility of closer to end-to-end encryption, maybe border-to-border encryption, in an affordable way. So we're kind of seeing that start to come up too.
And Ken, does this type of traffic get prioritized on the Science DMZ or not really, or how does it? I mean, or it's agnostic basically.
Was that to Chris or to Ken?
To Ken, I think.
Oh, I would say the way we looked at it was it wasn't directly prioritized. Just the fact that the Science DMZ was built allowed that traffic to go directly there versus going through the enterprise firewall and then all the way down to a campus or department level firewall. So like double firewalling because it was across 25 campuses. So we tried. We had a trial of a 10 gig IPsec card at the time. To try to work with a DoD partner, and but at the time they said we had enough fiber in the ground across campus. They just got dark fiber from us, and they just ran their own stuff and encrypted on their own. So we tried to do what Chris was mentioning, but it didn't happen in that use case. Something else we tried was we deployed on our Science DMZ and a network segmentation model using VLANs, MAC ACLs, and then over VPLS, and then eventually back over VXLAN EVPN back to HPC secure storage, what was a kind of a security enclave. We used SFlow on every switch and router port along the way, so we could see east-west traffic to verify that it was going across the correct switch and router hops and the paths. You could see the interfaces. It was literally going across to the layer 2 like trace route to also verify and monitor the IP, MAC address, service ports, and like I said, the traffic path. This was later developed as we got a new CISO into a full enterprise security enclave project and policy, that you had anything related to that kind of high sensitivity data was considered you had to apply for an authority to operate or an ATO. And then that whole process was kind of built into an entire team that did an entire review just for that data, whether it was, student data or something like that, all the way down to like HIPAA or things like that. So at a campus level, you have different different types of data to deal with different funding agencies and different compliance levels. So that ATO process kind of really scaled the process out from there. And if you just search up Penn State and ATO process, you'll see the whole thing there. So.
And can also, I have a question also from some of the participants. Shafak Chaudhry asked you, from CERT, I think, Glid Sayu, I think. Do you use something to share data between partners to take down threats, something like MISP? I'm not familiar with it, but I don't know if you are. MISP-project.org. Anyone can comment on this?
No, I'm not sure. I'm missing the one piece in there. What was an ISP or?
The question was, do you use something to share data between partners to take down threats?
Oh, no. We looked at that with Ren ISAC and how to sharing some of that data, but that was really more in the security group, and I was mostly in network engineering working on the science DMZ. So I'm not sure if I shared a few links down there. We did a peer review using the Trusted CI group with another science DMZ. We kind of peer reviewed each other just to kind of see the different models people were taking. But no, we never got too far into sharing the data back and forth.
Okay. And maybe Dr. Assi has maybe this question also for you from some of the participants. He said, what kinds of trends do you see in educational institutions regarding network security researchers working with the IT people responsible for the actual network and its security? Because one requires openness and the other wants tight control. So, you know, academic researchers and the IT guys on security aspects. I think this is a good question, and we have faced in many aspects, right, on this.
Yes, Elias, probably you know as well as me that since your days at Concordia, that the IT people, they always resist to, they provide you with the service, but they always resist to share any data with you. So we have been receiving resistance from the IT people in sharing their data with us for us to do our research.
So for Chaudhry that asked the question, I mean, we've been in trouble. I mean, because of this, you know, mostly because of, you know, doing some scans or and then someone knocks on your door saying what you're doing. So one thing that I learned is that you know, just send them a quick email or know the contact of the, you know, the CISO or the network operator, and then just mention that these are legitimate and for these reasons, and, you know, try to make some mitigation, right? So for example, we typically use a lot of scans, and one way to do it is that to have this IP address that is actually scanning to resolve to a website where people can actually opt out. So there are ways to mitigate this, but I think this is a concern.
I think they are quite concerned. I mean, one of my students, he was told that his scans, he can do them from home. So he was scanning to find vulnerabilities on electric vehicle charging infrastructure. And he was asked, don't do it from university. They're afraid of, you know, certain type of liabilities. So go do it from home. And that's what basically he did.
Oh, wow. Okay. And then the ISP maybe reach out to him, huh?
Well, it depends on how much bandwidth you know you are going to use to do your scans.
So also one question. I know I'm taking a bit of time, but I think this is, you know, nice discussion. A question about maybe Ken or Chris can shed light on that as well. Is there any concern among the panelists with regard to proposed EARN IT? I think, I don't know, the act. I'm not familiar with the act, about the possibility of inadvertently exposing encrypted sensitive data to unauthorized third parties. So the EARNet or EARN IT, EARNet probably act. Anyone familiar with this? Maybe the attendee can maybe elaborate a bit on this act. And we can, anyone would like some input? In general, I mean, exposing encrypted sensitive data to unauthorized third parties, I think this is a concern. I'm not sure about the act personally, but maybe someone can shed light on it, or maybe the attendee can elaborate a bit on it, and we take it in view. So let me move on to question 4. So this is also about, you know, data access. I think we talked about it kind of. I don't know if you have any other points. What's your experience with sharing empirical data to facilitate data-driven research related to high-speed networks? How do you handle this from a business and technical point of views? I don't know if anyone would like to add something. It's very kind of follow-up on the previous question about data-driven. I think Dr. Assi mentioned something. I don't know if Ken and Chris would like to add something. Ken, maybe from ESnet, can mention something more on this. And I don't know if General Lee would like to add something here.
This is Chris. I can comment briefly. So from kind of my University of Florida hat, I can talk a little bit and following on the question as well. So at UF, they've basically, or we've created almost like a cybersecurity DMZ type environment, almost a sandbox, where cybersecurity researchers can have their devices placed in a kind of a security posture that allows them a lot of freedom, but does not necessarily expose the campus enterprise infrastructure or the academic side of the mission of the university to any danger. We've placed that kind of technically using some virtualization, routing and forwarding, virtual routing and forwarding within our campus MPLS backbone. And so it allows us to place them in that environment in any building on campus. And going along with that, there's also now a process for researchers to get access to some level of data from the university. It goes through a screening process. Sometimes it's anonymized data, or mostly it's anonymized data, to allow them to do various research. There's been a lot of ask for DNS data, NAT data, DHCP data, stuff like that, flow information, that kind of stuff. And so there is a process within the university now to address that. It does take some period of time to get through that process, but it is there.
Well, I'll jump in with just one quick thing. It'll be interesting because, again, given Elias running this thing, I'm wondering what the longer term impact from Blue Dot and what they were able to do with their infectious disease surveillance system that they set up. And again, typically working with airlines and other areas, they don't want to share their data because everything's a dual-edged sword. So our success in being able to further develop things such as privacy-preserving analytics that anonymize data and utilizing technologies such as Secure Guard extension and what Intel is actually building into the microprocessors will probably determine how far we go in terms of our willingness to be able to share data back and forth.
Thanks for the input, General. I don't know if there's I don't think there's any more questions, although this keeps flashing.
Yeah. I would say one other thing we tried was we actually looked at the again the S-flow data from there, and looked at it because all the traffic represents really what's going through the network or what's really happening between researchers and clients, things like that. So you can easily derive top 10 clients, top 10 servers, applications, who's connecting to what cloud services, who you're peering with, where the country codes, things like that. So you can kind of start looking into this. If you tie it back to strategic planning, you can kind of see really where you need to be focused on, things like that. And if you want to even go a little further, to be able to take a network person and be able to talk to someone in finance, if you turn the bits and bytes going through your network and the dollars and cents by services, you can easily speak to a finance person saying it's costing X amount of dollars. Here's how much traffic's going through there, divided by the total number of the service at the end of the circuit. You can easily come up with some very, very quick ratioed numbers from traffic and the dollars and cents to be able to really see what's really going through your network and what's it really costing you. So just a different spin on it.
Excellent. Just going through some chats as well here. Okay. I think the questions are the same. Okay, we go here. So my last question that I thought, to put things for the future is your perspective about how things maybe, during this pandemic and moving forward, how things from a security perspective will adapt, what change. where do you think things are going bad that needs really, kind of prompt addressing? What are the things that should be done also from a, R&D perspective, whether from the, communication between the public sector and the industry and the education sector to actually move this security for high-speed networks to a next level. And if there are, forums, groups, maybe public sector entities that you are exploring for stuff like this. So, I want to hear your perspective on this. Maybe General Gay can start, and then we can go the same path.
I'll do mine very quickly, and then I got to jump onto another. So my former boss at the director of the NSA and U.S. Cyber Command, Admiral Rogers, used to be very clear. He'd say, never let a good crisis go to waste. There's a lot of pain in making changes. And so the fact that we're under this pain, his objective was very straightforward. He never wanted to return to the level of security, whatever we had before, whether you're looking at the Snowden incident or other incidents that happened over history. It was always to come out stronger on the other side. And so I just would offer that as we look forward in terms of, what are we projecting for the changes? I like the last commenter's thing. We've got to work across the field. So getting folks to talk to each other. This last week, I thought one of the ones that came out that will be positive. If you look at the president put out a executive order on bulk power and protecting critical infrastructure. If you look at a lot of the things he talked about there, we have looked at that as an IT problem. It's not an IT problem. We didn't include some of the people, just like you talked about finance people, including the engineers and the operators of critical infrastructure who run industrial control systems and our SCADA systems. So getting that dialogue going is an important piece.
Excellent, General. And if you have to leave, feel free. Thank you. Don't. Thank you for all.
Thanks, Elias. Yeah, I'm going to jump off for another one here, but thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to join this wonderful group. Thank you.
General, thank you very much. We'll keep in touch. Thank you for your input. Yeah, maybe Dr. Assi can maybe follow up on that.
So high speed networks. I mean, this terminology. Does it mean, are you referring to 5G network, Elias, or beyond 5G?
Yeah, so the context here, I mean, typically related to this workshop is typically science DMZs, which basically are networks that transfer, research data mostly and R&D data, and this, it's dedicated basically network to do stuff like that. But feel free to bring your perspective on high-speed networks from 5G and other stuff as well. Just internet.
Yeah. So indeed, with 5G, there comes a diversity of applications that will be enabled by and services that will be enabled by this technology. It is anticipated that a large increase in the number of connected devices as well that will be connected to the network, and with that, we anticipate an increase in the number of vulnerabilities and a broader range. Landscape is going to obviously increase. So we mentioned at the beginning or shortly before the usage of AI. So adopting AI to empower intelligent and adaptive, if you call it, or autonomous security management would become critical to enable the mitigation and detection of those security threats or emerging security threats.
Excellent. Okay. Any input from Ken and Chris on this?
So with respect, yes, I'm not sure if you can still hear.
Yeah, I can hear you. You're cutting off, but I can still hear you.
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you, Doctor. Did we lose?
Yes.
Yeah.
It seems my internet, it seems that my high-speed internet is not stable.
I think it's.
You mentioned also working groups or forums. So I know that the ITU, there is a focus group on using machine learning for future networks.
Okay.
And in Europe, I know that Assi has developed a special task force to develop the specification to mitigate threats that are stemming from the deployment of normally AI in information and communication technologies. So these are the two working groups or forums that I am aware of.
Excellent. Thank you.
So this is Chris. From my perspective, I think one of the keys is programmability in the network, and we're seeing that starting to show up at scale with some of the ASIC development. You know, we don't know what we don't know right now, and you know, even well-financed networks have a you know, 3, 4, 5 year refresh cycle, and you know, security threats advance at a much more rapid pace. So the network has to be ready to handle new threats without forklifting. So I think programmability is a really important part. I think some of the newer technologies, such as in-band telemetry, have some security applications, especially understanding network behavior that can be leveraged. I think that you know, it's typically NetFlow done at a regional or national level is heavily sampled, looking at the ability to downsample research traffic to really understand it better from a security perspective is something that's important. You know, and leveraging that to better understand, even using streaming telemetry to better understand what normal traffic patterns look like. And, you know, even leveraging AI just to alert you to abnormal behavior, not necessarily take action, but tell you when things don't look right, that you need to look deeper. You know, larger scale enforcement mechanisms, right? Being able to push rule sets, in some cases stateful, in some cases not stateful. We're starting to see state show up in ASICs. You know, Tofino supports some degree of state at the ASIC level. You know, being able to push state or stateless rule sets into platforms at scale. Some of the merchant silicon we're seeing now is starting to back off that from in certain directions. It's difficult to push rule sets, you know, drop rule sets in. You know, but we're seeing, you know, with Tofino and Nokia's FP4 complex, the ability to do deep packet inspection and things like that. So it's basically making the network as flexible at rate as you possibly can.
That's a great point, yeah.
Yeah, I would agree 100%. I mean, knowing what's going through your network, being able to do it at scale, having things that can, you know, handle the traffic going through there and be able to analyze it, and then offer the programmability to go back and you know, manipulate things if needed. It's just a different way to do it compared to an enterprise network, where everything's just kind of funneled through the firewall and you get what you get. So it's just it's a different scale of a problem than just a traditional enterprise or, you know, network. So
excellent. Okay. Thank you very much. I think we ran a bit of time outside of the time, but I think the discussions were very nice. I think the perspectives also from different areas were very fruitful. I'm gonna pass it through to Dr. Jorge